The first time the townspeople saw the former Navy SEAL standing in front of that broken, sagging house, they laughed. They laughed at the peeling paint that curled like dried skin. They laughed at the windows patched with plywood and plastic sheets. They laughed at the roof that looked as if one strong wind could tear it apart. And they laughed at the man who had once faced bullets and bombs without flinching, now standing silently in the dirt with nothing but a worn duffel bag and an old German shepherd by his side. But no one was laughing the night the dog began to dig. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in judging people by their hearts rather than their circumstances, take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that sometimes what looks broken on the outside is carrying a treasure within. His name was Caleb Turner, a decorated veteran who had served 15 years as part of the elite teams of the United States Navy SEALs. He had survived missions most people would never even hear about. He had crawled through desert sand under gunfire, navigated dark waters in silence, and carried wounded brothers on his back. Yet nothing in his military career prepared him for the silence of coming home. When Caleb returned to his small hometown after retirement, he expected things to feel familiar. Instead, everything felt distant. The grocery store had new owners. The high school had a fresh coat of paint. The old oak tree in the town square had been cut down after a storm. Time had moved forward without him. And while the town had changed, so had he. The only inheritance his late uncle left him was the house at the edge of town, a crumbling structure everyone called the skeleton. It had once been a proud farmhouse decades ago, but years of neglect had turned it into an eyesore. The porch leaned to one side like it was tired of standing. The fence had collapsed in several places. Weeds claimed the yard as their own. When Caleb moved in, the whispers began. Some said he must have lost all his money. Others assumed he had no family left to take him in. A few simply shook their heads and said, "War changes a man." Children rode their bikes past the property and dared each other to touch the rusty gate before speeding away, giggling. Caleb ignored them. Every morning, he rose before sunrise, just as he had during his service. He brewed black coffee on an old stove that groaned with every use. He stepped onto the crooked porch with his dog, Ranger, and watched the mist hover over the empty fields behind the house. Ranger had been his partner during his final years in service. The German shepherd was trained to detect explosives and sense danger before humans could. But more than that, Ranger had been the steady heartbeat in the chaos of war. When the nightmares started after Caleb returned home, it was Ranger who nudged him awake, resting his head on Caleb's chest until his breathing slowed. The townspeople saw only a broken house. They did not see the man carefully reinforcing the beams from the inside. They did not see the hours he spent cleaning decades of dust from the floors. They did not see him sanding old wooden panels by hand, refusing to replace them because they reminded him of his uncle's stories about growing up there. Money was tight. Caleb's pension covered the basics, but repairs were expensive. He took small jobs around town, fixing fences, repairing sheds, helping elderly neighbors carry groceries. Some accepted his help with quiet gratitude. Others paid him less than they should, assuming he was desperate. The mockery grew louder when a storm rolled through one evening and tore off a portion of the already fragile roof. Rain poured into the living room, soaking the floorboards and ruining the small stack of books Caleb kept by the couch. The next day, as he climbed up with borrowed tools to patch the damage, a group of men from town stood by their trucks watching. One of them muttered loudly enough for him to hear that a war hero should be living in something better than a shack ready for demolition. Laughter followed. Caleb kept hammering, each strike controlled and steady, as if he were driving nails into more than just wood. Inside, however, the weight pressed on him. He had faced enemies without fear, but this quiet humiliation felt different. It was not loud and explosive, it was slow and suffocating. At night, he would sit on the floor beside Ranger, running his fingers through the dog's fur, wondering if he had made a mistake coming back. The house, despite its condition, held memories. His uncle had been the only person who wrote to him consistently during deployments. Those letters spoke of resilience, of the importance of roots, of building something that lasts. Caleb felt a strange loyalty to the place, as if restoring it was part of honoring the man who believed in him before medals and titles existed. Weeks turned into months. Piece by piece, the interior began to change. The floors no longer creaked as loudly. The walls were scrubbed clean. Caleb repaired the plumbing himself after studying manuals late into the night. From the outside, though, little improvement was visible. The peeling paint remained. The porch still leaned. And so the laughter continued. Then came the day everything shifted. It started with Ranger behaving oddly. The dog had always been alert, but that afternoon he seemed fixated on a patch of ground in the backyard near an old, rusted oak stump. He circled it repeatedly, sniffing with intense focus. Caleb assumed it was a squirrel burrow or some small animal. But Ranger began digging. At first, Caleb called him off, not wanting the yard to become even more of a mess. Ranger obeyed reluctantly, yet returned moments later, digging with greater urgency. Dirt flew behind him in frantic bursts. There was a determination in his movements Caleb recognized from their deployment days. Ranger only dug like that when he sensed something significant. A chill ran down Caleb's spine. He grabbed a shovel from the shed and knelt beside the dog. The soil was compacted and heavy, as though undisturbed for years. With each scoop, Caleb's heart pounded harder. His training whispered caution. Ranger stood alert, tail rigid, eyes locked on the growing hole. Then the shovel struck something solid. It was not the hollow thud of rock. It was metallic. Carefully, Caleb brushed away the dirt with his hands. A rusted metal box emerged from the earth, corners dented, surface corroded by time. It was heavy, far heavier than he expected. His pulse roared in his ears as he lifted it out and set it on the ground. Ranger sat back, watching silently. Caleb hesitated before opening it. For a moment, he imagined it could be something dangerous, though reason told him otherwise. With steady hands, he pried the latch open. Inside were stacks of old documents wrapped in oilcloth, bundles of yellowed letters, and beneath them, several sealed envelopes and a small leather journal. There was also something else, a pouch filled with coins and neatly banded cash that had been protected from moisture. Caleb's breath caught. The journal belonged to his uncle. Page after page detailed investments his uncle had made quietly over the years, land leases, mineral rights agreements, and shares in a small energy company that had later grown into something substantial. The documents in the box were proof of ownership, long forgotten or deliberately hidden. As Caleb read under the fading light, tears blurred the ink. His uncle had written about wanting to surprise him one day, to ensure he would always have a foundation to stand on after service. He had buried the box for safekeeping during a time when the house was at risk of foreclosure, intending to retrieve it later. But illness came quickly, and the secret went with him. Until Ranger found it. Over the following weeks, Caleb contacted lawyers and financial advisors. The process was slow and complicated, but every document checked out. The investments had grown quietly over the years. What his uncle left behind was not just sentimental, it was substantial. News travels fast in a small town. The same men who once laughed at the broken roof now drove past more slowly, noticing the contractors surveying the land. The same neighbors who whispered about failure watched as trucks delivered lumber, bricks, and fresh paint. Caleb did not build a mansion. He restored the farmhouse with dignity. He reinforced the porch properly. He replaced the windows with sturdy glass. He painted the exterior a warm, welcoming color that caught the sunlight beautifully. But the biggest change was not the house. Caleb established a small foundation in his uncle's name, dedicated to helping veterans transition back into civilian life. He converted part of the property into a workshop where former service members could learn carpentry, mechanics, and practical skills. He hired local workers at fair wages, giving opportunities to those who needed steady employment. The town's laughter faded into quiet respect. One afternoon, months after Ranger had started digging, a group of children approached the now-restored fence. They were hesitant at first. Caleb invited them in, showing them how to sand wood safely, how to measure twice and cut once. Ranger lay nearby, watching with calm pride. The house that had once been mocked became a place of gathering. Community barbecues filled the yard with music and conversation. Veterans shared stories under string lights that glowed softly against the evening sky. Caleb often stood at the edge of the property at sunset, remembering the day he arrived with nothing but a duffel bag and a loyal dog. He realized the house had never truly been broken. It had been waiting for someone who understood resilience, who saw beyond surface damage. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement helps stories like this reach more people who need encouragement. And before we reach the end, I have a special request. Comment the word respect if you believe no one should be judged by appearances alone. Years later, people no longer referred to it as the skeleton. They called it Turner House. Not because it was the biggest or most beautiful building in town, but because it represented something deeper. It stood as proof that ridicule can turn into admiration, that patience can outlast mockery, and that loyalty, whether from a person or a dog, can uncover buried blessings. Ranger grew older, his once dark muzzle turning gray. He moved slower across the yard, but his eyes remained sharp. Caleb made sure the dog had a comfortable bed by the fireplace in winter and a shaded spot under the porch in summer. Every evening, he would sit beside him, grateful for the day that persistent digging changed everything. The secret buried beneath the broken house was never just about money. It was about faith passed from one generation to another. It was about unseen sacrifices. It was about a veteran who refused to let pride stop him from starting over, even when the world laughed. And in the quiet moments, when the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of gold and violet, Caleb would whisper a thank you, to his uncle, to the journey that shaped him, and most of all, to the loyal dog who saw what no one else could. If this story moved you, if it reminded you to look beyond the surface and to believe in second chances, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment telling us what part touched you most. Your support keeps these powerful stories alive. Because sometimes, the most valuable treasures are not the ones buried in the ground, but the ones waiting patiently inside hearts that refuse to give up.